Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Party Assistant General Secretary, Mr. Daniel Duki, who is chairing tonight, my cabinet colleague, the Minister of Finance. But first, let me acknowledge our party officers who are here in the audience tonight. Our party chairman, Senator Franklin Khan, Deputy Political Leader, the Venerable one and only Mrs. Joan Yule Williams, all my cabinet colleagues from the House and the Senate, councillors, the Mayor of Arima, all you citizens of the Diego Martin area and visitors, welcome to Diego Martin, and thank you very much for coming out in this venue and providing us with the environment in which we can speak and report to the wider national community. I want to acknowledge my colleague from Ruka Maloney, the head of the Women's League in the PNM, Mrs. Camille Robinson-Regis, who every time we go anywhere, she's from there. So I have nothing more to say. And of course, our hard-working councillor from Paramin, Councillor Mendez. Members of the media, those of you at home, thank you very much for paying attention to the PNM's platform tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, these are difficult times, but we are not without hope and we are not without some resources. As a matter of fact, those of us who are called upon to manage the country's affairs at this time, we are doing so during a particularly difficult period. And it is in times like these that it's difficult to make yourself as popular as you would like to be. Because a lot of what has to be done against the background of what the Minister of Finance has just outlined are not actions that bring shouts of joy and cheers of support. They are actions of concern and sometimes actions of pain. But I tell you one thing, we have stuck to the plan that we came into government with and the plans that we have adjusted, because when we came into government, we discovered the extent of the problem that we are facing, not to mention the external shocks that attended our circumstances. But the slogan that we took up on our banner is making progress towards prosperity. And tonight, I'm very pleased to hear from the Minister of Finance that we are beginning to make that slow progress in the right direction. And I want to thank you all for the patience and your understanding and your support and your individual contributions in Trinidad and Tobago, which is helping us as a people overcome this period of difficulty, which we are confident, if we handle our affairs properly, will not last forever and certainly will not last for as long as some people hope it will. Ladies and gentlemen, we are charting our way forward. And our first assignment in the circumstances that we came into in September 2015 was to stabilize the country's economy and preserve the social fabric. You don't have an assignment to reduce the national budget by $13 billion. Reduce, not expend. And offer to give you this and give you that and promise you this and pay this. It was the opposite. So our assignment was one to bring us to a place where we can manage to live decently, going forward in a sustainable way on incomes that were a lot less than we've been accustomed to, but not insignificant. So we've been doing that. And I will say again, as I've always said, there's never one way to do anything. And in government, It's always about choosing an option because there are always a series of options that you could pursue. I'll tell you one thing too. There's virtually no option that you can choose on any matter that would please everybody, regardless of the option. If you open the treasury on Sunday morning and say, come down and take out as much as you want, bring a bucket, bring a pan, they will say, what madness is this? And if you say that we're all going to heaven and the angel Gabriel come down to take us up, there are people who are going to say, but look at the wings, they're too short, they're too white. So we know that. So we expect criticism. And we are not against criticism because, in fact, what it does, it keeps you honest, keeps you whole, keeps you focused. Because you know if you miss, there are those there whose personal lives might be a total mess, but they could tell you how to run the country. But we have this lovely free country. A lot of the advice that we have got from you, the people, is to stay the course and take this ship of state to safe and calm waters. We're doing that. Unfortunately, as we do that, facing the difficulties in the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Health, there are some of our citizens who seem to have gone stark raving mad and are hell-bent on making the national news every day by who killed who. We're spending $2 billion a year trying to find every gun in this country and to catch every gunman before he shoots. And we took about 1,064 guns out of their hands last year. That didn't reduce the murder rate. And when you think you're getting the better of them with the guns in the street, killing you with stone and knife now. In recent days, we as a people have felt the pain for the families that have experienced what has happened in Lebre and in the Kwesi and elsewhere. How long, oh Lord, how long will we have to endure this? But tonight, I want to call on the police officers, the law enforcement officers of all ilk, rectifying it. Yes, I was saying, I want to appeal to the security services, the officers who risk their lives every day and protect us from those who would harm us, to stay the course. Because the government of Trinidad and Tobago is resolute in our focus on national security, and we are confident that the time will come when the common news that we become accustomed to would be different. We are on the job, and we are expecting better results. Ladies and gentlemen, notwithstanding how daunting the task was, our plan was to keep the economy functional, keep the economy whole, and make the most of what we had. In other words, do more with less. We have cut out a lot of unnecessary expenditure, starting with a reduced size of the cabinet. Let me remind you that there are about 10 ministers less in this government than the last one, for a saving of almost $50 million a year. And over the 5-year period, that will be about $250 million in savings. Government expenditure on itself has been reduced. And of course, we have kept most people on the payroll, even in instances where we could have reduced the payroll, if only to bring about greater efficiencies. But we know that in difficult times, everybody has to have an opportunity for a job, in most instances, is a family, because there might be one breadwinner in the family. And we have to be careful how people lose jobs. And where the government in this economy is the main driver of the economy, you have to understand that when the government revenue collapses, the challenge is a huge one. 2.5 years of difficulty, we can report to you that we remain stable and that our economy is beginning to improve. Many people blame our circumstance on the fact that we have lived too comfortably and too well on the energy sector. We should not be making apologies for having oil and gas. But whatever happened in the past, however else we have done it, the one thing we can't deny is that if we are to come out of our situation and maintain even a semblance of the quality of life that we've become accustomed to, the hydrocarbon sector will play a major role in that. And as we talk about diversifying the economy, meaning doing other things beside in the energy sector, we still have to acknowledge that the contribution from the energy sector, gas in particular, and oil to a lesser extent, would be huge in whatever budget that we are using and operating in Trinidad and Tobago. And that is why one of the first assignments of this government was to rectify a number of the shortcomings in the energy sector. If we had the opportunity of putting up the graphs tonight to show you our revenue from the energy sector over the years, you would have seen a curve way up here, 2013, 2014. But in 2014, you would have seen that curve diving way down here. That was when a policy decision of the government of Trinidad and Tobago had an effect on the country's revenue, because it impacted on how the oil companies handled their books and what exposure they had for taxes. The policy that was meant to improve the drilling to get more gas had a knock-on effect of reducing government's revenue. So on one hand, we did something to get a benefit, but that thing had the effect of causing us to lose significant revenue. And of course, there was something else. We came into government at a time when the Point Lisas industries, their contracts, many of them, were coming to an end. And many of the companies were not getting enough gas to operate their factories to the limit that they were supposed to. So we were short of gas, contracts were coming to an end, and we were having to give incentives for the companies to go and drill to get more gas. All of these were the issues that faced us as we came in September 2015. Month-to-month contracts in Point Lisas, gas curtailment in Point Lisas, and the main companies that were doing the drilling holding their hands and saying, until we get an agreement in Trinidad and Tobago on the gas price that we will receive for the gas that we're going to produce, we are holding our hand. So your government had to fix that. One of the things we met was an agreement for a new plant in La Brea to be built by Mitsubishi, one of the largest companies in Japan, one of the largest banks in Japan, and involved in other business. Mitsubishi was going to build a plant in La Brea. The outgoing government entered into a contract with that company and the government of Japan's interests, with the NGC holding 10% in the company, to build this new plant that requires gas in 2019, but contracting that that plant will get the first call on any gas that we have in Trinidad and Tobago. What that meant is that the existing Point Lisa's plants would have fallen in line behind this new plant. And their contracts would have been ignored, and their business would have been ignored, and many of them would have had to close their doors if we didn't get gas for everybody, because this new plant was going to have a claim on first call on the gas. More importantly, if the business failed, the NGC would have been liable for any outstanding debt in the company. That's what we met. And we, the new government of Trinidad and Tobago, our PNM government, facing this contract, took the position that the government of Trinidad and Tobago will not accept those terms. And I tell you this because last week, when we had the energy spotlight to inform you, the people, about what your business looks like and what we are facing, some of the pundits begin immediately to tell us that we are going to damage the country because we are talking about reopening contracts and discussing contracts with our companies, and you don't do that because if you do that, they will blacklist you and they wouldn't invest here and be bad for investment and so on. And those unpatriotic, what you call them in the opposition, rather than stand with the government in trying to fix our circumstance, jump out in front and pronouncing that Trinidad and Tobago is now an unattractive place to invest because the government says it's questioning what is happening with us and our companies and our earnings in this country. But let me tell you something. Whenever the government of Trinidad and Tobago is afraid to stand up for the interests of Trinidad and Tobago, that is the day we should hand back our independence to England. I'll take you back to Japan. When we saw what the last government agreed to, and seeing the hundreds of millions of US dollars in claims that the Point Lisa's companies would have made against the NGC, billions of US dollars in claims that would have come in our direction if we had stayed with that contract to give Mitsubishi first call on the gas while shortchanging the existing plants in Point Lisa's. I sent Minister Stuart Young to Japan to speak directly to the government of Japan and Mitsubishi in Japan and to tell them what is the position of the government of Trinidad and Tobago. It took 2 days, and the contract was reopened, renegotiated, and those terms were taken out of the contract. And when that happened, we then signed on and gave the go-ahead to the plant that is being built in La Brea now. The Mitsubishi plant that's being built in La Brea now. That is what they left us. That's how we fixed it, and that is how it is going now. So all of a sudden, these pontificators who damage us in that way, and their friends could tell us about contracts and the sanctity of contracts. But let me tell you the people how it goes. In 2014, there were contracts as to how gas companies operate in this country. There were contractual arrangements. But the companies, the Energy Chamber, admitted and told you recently, they made representations to the government then to change the arrangement, to give the oil companies, the gas companies, improved circumstance. So in 2014, it was okay to change the arrangement in the oil companies' favor. But in 2018, when we're getting $1 billion in taxes, and the foreign companies who look at the situation tell us that we are being shortchanged, if we talk about that, interfering with contracts, and contracts are sacred. So it wasn't sacred in 2014 when we changed it in the company's favor, but it's sacred now when you want to change it in the country's favor. I represent the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And your companies look after themselves very well. And we are in no fight with anyone because we are a country that we have handled, except under the UNC government, we have handled contracts very well and very seriously in this country. When the UNC came into office, they met the PNM government having paid for OPVs. The money was in the bank in London in the company's account. They canceled the contracts and asked back for the money, and that was the end of the OPVs. There wasn't breaking contracts then. Contracts wasn't sacred then. They met us in an arrangement with the Chinese government for an aluminium business in Trinidad and Tobago funded by the Chinese Exim Bank. They broke that contract and shut down the aluminium smelter, and today we are facing hundreds of millions of dollars in claim from the Chinese interests for what they have done. Contracts wasn't sacred then. The people of Labre voted for the PNM. Fitzgerald Jeffrey won the election on that matter, but they still canceled the project in Labre. Contract wasn't sacred then. Like it's only sacred when they meet oil companies, executives in the hotel room, in the bedroom slippers. Contract sacred then. But I'm saying to you, we, as a responsible government in Trinidad and Tobago, who created through governmental activity the current hydrocarbon industry here, because the gas industry here was a government initiative. It was the government of Trinidad and Tobago that formed the NGC, that created the environment for downstreamers in Point Lisas to give upstreamers the opportunity to find gas and to sell it there and to sell it abroad. We have an interest in this. We have a stake in this, and we are responsible. So we can talk to these companies without fear or favor. We talk to them with respect. And I dare tell you, they respect us too. Tomorrow morning, I'm meeting a very high-ranking Chinese official at 8 o'clock, passing through Trinidad tomorrow morning, ahead of my visit to China. And in those conversations, one of the things we have to talk about is how do we manage what they've left for us. We owe China billions of dollars. The boat that they bought in China, election week, you know, they trust it and leave us to pay for it. Yeah, the boat came here on credit. Over and above the $5 billion we paid in the back pay for public servants, we had to pay $250 million US for that boat. We paid it. Not only that, the other 11, remember they bought 12 boats for elections? We had to pay the bill. Understand that? And they want to give us advice now about contracts. So as I talk to the Chinese now, as the government of Trinidad and Tobago's leader, we're talking about settling on the smelter. We're talking about the Arima Hospital. We're talking about, we finished paying for the boat. And of course, there are other business that we do with China because China is a partner with Trinidad and Tobago. But I tell you this so you could understand that when they start telling you about how things are awful in Trinidad and how bad this government is and how incompetent the Prime Minister is, I want you to remember where we came from and how we got here and what we are dealing with. Because they would look you in the face and tell you that they're coming back. They're coming back. Right here in Diego Martin, when Arnold Roberts won his case, having been facilitated by the Prime Minister of the UNC, exposing the document before it was ready. Remember that? The same day Arnold Roberts won his case, they came to Diego Martin and had a meeting and show him a senatorship. He coming back. Munilal coming back. Jolin John come back. They're waiting there for you. But I tell you, I have confidence in the intelligence of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and you know which side of the bread is buttered on. We, in opposition, we stood with the unions who were decimated by the last government. May I remind you that the last government was a coalition, and one part of that coalition was the labor movement. A political party of labor was in that government. They came out, and we stood with them because we stand on principle. Those principles remain the same. And today, we can say to the labor movement, the PNM is your friend for all time. In Eric Williams' time, in Chambers' time, in Manning's time, and in my time, the PNM is a friend of labor. No other political party could say that. Go and look at our history. We have a history in the labor movement. Today, my good friend says that the people who were killed this week is the Prime Minister's fault. Now, I take that to mean that there are no other issues in labor to be dealt with. So good is the relationship and the peace and prosperity in labor that is the labor leaders' comment. That who was killed in the Crazy and who was killed in Labrie is the Prime Minister's fault. But we have maintained our responsibility to ensure that job creation is something we try to do even in these difficult circumstances. We create jobs, short-term jobs. We create jobs through construction projects in the development program. Tomorrow morning, a judge is going to be ruling tomorrow morning on one of our major development projects, the extension of the highway to Sangre Grande. It's called the Kumuto-Manzanilla Highway, taking you to Sangre Grande, on the way to Tobago and on the way to Tobago. This is our development initiative. One very happy soul, happy for generations, gone to court to tell the court, stop it. And they go into the court with a mouthful of lies that we're going to be building a road through the Aripo Savannah, this delicate reserve, when in fact, we have all the approvals required from all the state agencies so as to proceed with that project. If tomorrow morning the judge rules that the project is to be stopped, that is a huge piece of the development program that is now stopped. And all the job creation that ought to take place there and the infrastructure development that should take place there to bring about the economic diversification that we are looking forward to would have been stopped by the happy and the comfortable. The people of Toco, people of Cubana, people of Matlot, people of Sangre Grande, they want it. But others, like Labrie, others don't want it. Let's see what the court says tomorrow. Let's see what the court says tomorrow. We, in the PNM, we have gone ahead and settled the gas price issue. As soon as we got a settlement, as a result of the initiatives we took in Houston, where I traveled to meet the decision makers in Shell and BP, so that they could speak directly to the NGC, not through their middle managers. We got an agreement on the gas price, and that freed up $10 billion in investment for development in Trinidad. And that is progressing quite smoothly. But we have issues there, because out of that $10 billion, if it is spent largely on supporting foreign action in Trinidad and Tobago, then the people of Trinidad and Tobago wouldn't get much out of it, other than to report to you that there's a $10 billion investment taking place in Trinidad and Tobago. You have to ask yourself, who is getting that money? The North Sea has pretty much contracted or closed down in some areas as far as hydrocarbon is concerned. Those companies are looking elsewhere for opportunities. Some of them are looking in Trinidad and Tobago. And some of them are displacing our local people who have been traditionally supplying certain businesses. So this government has come out and said, we are going to be very aggressive in ensuring that there is good local content composition in the expenditure so we can get a fair amount of this 10 billion or how much it is that's being invested in our country. That's what we're saying. We have local companies that can contribute in a variety of ways. We are saying to the big companies, don't rule them out. Don't set conditions that are too difficult for them to meet so as to favor foreign contractors. It is the government's role to protect the local industry, the local business, and the local people. And when we do that, would you believe that there are a handful of people here who have a problem with that? Well, this PNM government does not have a problem when representing the interests of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And whether it has to do with work permits, where if there are local people who can do the jobs, then they should get first call. And if there are foreigners who are doing the jobs, then there should be some kind of local understudy so that sometime in the not too distant future, those local people can have the skills and be able to prosper in an industry of their own. That's how it is done. We can't just walk into another country and say, I want a job and I could do this and get a job. You are screened by that country, starting with a visa. But all of a sudden, there are those who will tell you that if we stand up for our interests, we are being reckless or we're being cavalier and this could befall us or that could befall us. But I remember when the PNM government bought Texaco, there were pundits in this country who were saying that was a bad investment. We got thousands of acres of land. I think it was 75,000 acres of land. We got that. We got the refinery. We got the business. And it was that purchase that allowed us, when the oil price jumped in the first oil shock, to be able to have received the proceeds of that and to use that to develop this country in a way that we're taking for granted now. When we used to flare gas off the East Coast, it was a PNM government policy and initiative that compressed that gas and made it available to Point Lisas to create the industry there now, with so many benefiting from. And if I say, as the leader of Trinidad and Tobago, that if the shareholders of those companies that are benefiting are making record profit in these times, why are the people of Trinidad and Tobago having a record reduction in our income? All we're asking for, as a result of the dramatic change in the circumstances, that we have a look at the equation so that we can get what we can call a fair share and a fair return from a resource that is ours. In the Ministry of Energy, we have found and we have determined that that ministry is unprepared and underperforming in this particular period, under these particular circumstances. And as Prime Minister, it is my duty to rectify that. And I'm fortunate to have with me a geological colleague who understands what I'm saying and what the government is doing. And together, we have gone and looked for all our scholars, many of whom have gone to some of the best universities, come back to Trinidad and Tobago or don't come back at all because some of them are not welcome here after they graduate. So we train them and then we don't use them. We don't put them to develop the country. We don't give them the opportunity to learn the business. Well, we are putting them in the Ministry of Energy in a particular group under expert guidance, and I tell you in 5 years, we will have some of the best people in energy, in oil and gas, back in the Ministry of Energy. Some of them are your children, trained in A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and come here. Doing what? We don't know. Some of them we don't even know where they are. We have to change all of that. And we are doing that because we, in the PNM, we believe that notwithstanding what other technologies might come, notwithstanding how we might diversify the economy away from the hydrocarbon sector, we believe that we still have a bright and long and sustainable future in the hydrocarbon sector, and we'll continue to invest in it. We'll invest finances and human capital. Our reserves are diminishing. We don't wait until the last drop is used up to begin to look for new ones so that we can continue in the business. It is because we understand that our reserves are not where they should be, given the rate of consumption and the kind of downstream business that we could have in Trinidad and Tobago, why early in the government tenure, we opened discussions with the government of Venezuela and successfully had signatures on a program which is going almost to completion in the next few weeks. We expect the last signing to take place, where we are aiming to access Venezuelan gas from eastern Venezuela. And the first day that pipeline is laid down and gas flows from the Dragon Field to Trinidad's Point Lisas, our future in the energy market would have been extended by decades. That's what we've been doing. And those are the issues that attract the attention of a serious government. In 2.5 years, I want to ask you here tonight, what were the major scandals of this government? What were the major bacchanals of this government? We have come out of a period in 2010 to 2015 where every Monday morning was a scandal and a bacchanal. and government officers enriching themselves. I can say to you tonight, that does not exist in Trinidad and Tobago today. And it is not by accident that the last assessment of us on the corruption scale has shown that Trinidad and Tobago has improved considerably on that scale. We're going in the right direction. We're far from perfect, but I tell you, we are a long way from where we've been. And you see, I keep telling you that one of the most important assignments of the leadership of your country is with the appointments we make. A lot of newspaper pages, a lot of television commentators, a lot of radio commentary was expended on the Marlene issue. Because there were those who were telling the country that they had evidence that Ms. MacDonald was involved in this and was involved in that and was involved in that in the Manning government. She was investigated under the Manning government. She was found not to have done anything wrong. They didn't give up. They came back and said they had new information. And they sent back new information to the new Integrity Commission. And one of the allegations that they made against Marlene MacDonald was that she, as Minister of Housing, had used her office to enrich herself or her partner in some arrangement. It was that allegation that caused me to have removed Marlene MacDonald from the Ministry of Housing and from the cabinet. That particular allegation. I said to her, as Minister of Housing, this allegation being made in this way, and the Integrity Commission taking it in this way, step aside and not allow them to say that you are interfering or you're in a position to interfere with the investigation because it is an action in your ministry that you are being accused of having mishandled. And she understood, and she stepped aside. And of course, it went on and on and on. But today, eventually, at the end of it all, for the second time, a member of the cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago had been found not to have been in breach of the Integrity in Public Life Act. But I will tell you something. There are people in this country for whom that is not sufficient. And they will continue to harangue with innuendos and righteous indignation. But I want to say one thing to Kirkweed tonight. The next time you write me and send me a text, let it be an explanation for the motor cars that you were renting to Munilal in Ministry of Housing. Because I still don't understand that yet. Right? Because as far as I recall, as Minister of Housing, there was no provision made for the minister to have a Range Rover or a Benz. So the next text you send me, it must be an answer to that, or don't text me at all. And I will tell you about making decisions about personnel. It fell to your government to treat with the vacancy that arose with respect to the appointment of a president in Trinidad and Tobago. We took our responsibility very seriously. We looked at the national population, and we looked to see who, in our view, could best fill that position. And with decorum and good order, we went through the process. And today, we have a president in whom we are all proud. And I have every confidence that the coming of President Paul Weeks will contribute to the peace and good order in Trinidad and Tobago. As much as we put a lot of effort in the hydrocarbon sector to continue to earn the kinds of earnings that the sector can produce for us, and as we speak respectfully to the oil companies to see whether we can make adjustments to improve the circumstance of the people of Trinidad and Tobago on the earning side. And as we remain a very attractive location for investment in oil and gas in this part of the world, we also want to focus on expanding our economy in the area of tourism. We've had a disaster for the last 12 months with respect to Tobago. But Tobagonians are resilient people, and I have every confidence that in the matter of a few weeks, we'll begin to rectify that situation once and for all. The people of Tobago have been hard done by as a result of the arrangements that were in place at the port. My understanding is that in a few days, maybe 2 or 3 days, I hope, no more than that, that the Spirit would come out of dry dock. I wish I had the job to do, but I didn't have it to do hands-on, but I'm responsible for it, especially since I'm a Tobagonian. But Trinidad and Tobago is such a place. This vessel went in for dry docking, a 6-week exercise. And after 9 months, it's not ready. But of course, the Prime Minister is responsible for that. I tell you, my approach to that is that people must be made to do their jobs in Trinidad and Tobago or be held accountable. There's too much of a lack of accountability in Trinidad and Tobago, in all spheres, that could result in that. And some people see it as an entitlement to perform like that. However, the vessel is due out in service in a few days. That will give us back a fast ferry after substantial expenditure in the repairs. The new vessel is on its way here. The assistant captain is monitoring its movement down. It's going to be here by the end of April, I'm told. So by the end of April, we will have 2 ferries. The new one carrying what? How many passengers? 700 passengers. And the refurbished Spirit, which is larger. So we will have about 1,600 seats available to Tobago. So all that rah-rah about Tobago being marooned and abandoned and deserted and so on, at the end of April, that should come to an end. And the Express should be into dry dock. And we expect that the result will be quite different to what we got with the Spirit. We will learn from that. So very soon, the tourism plant in Tobago will get a boost. And because the government has been responsible for this development, which has caused hardship in Tobago, we have to find some way to bring about relief and a catalyst for the economy of Tobago. Because Tobago can make a serious contribution to the national economy, not next month or next year, but for the many years ahead. It's against that background that we are still working very hard on trying to get in Tobago a sandals project so that we become one of the locations in the Caribbean that benefits so much from being known as a location where that service is available. World-class, all-inclusive service in Tobago, and we're proceeding with that. Today, the Cabinet approved the construction in Tobago of a new terminal building to meet that scale of tourism that we are aiming for. And of course, at the level of the Ministry of Energy, the Energy Subcommittee, and the Office of Prime Minister and elsewhere in the government, we are talking to investors, some of whom are looking towards manufacturing, industry, marine. We are working on those things, but we are not going to make any announcements until we are at a stage where it is firmed up. Because I don't want to be like the last government. The last government made a number of announcements every time they talked to a potential entrepreneur. A number of businesses, a number of plans. Pubic was coming to do a $5 billion investment. A carousel plant was coming. This was coming. Well, at least Christmas was coming. It came and gone. Those plans never came. We're not going to do that. We will announce to you what is signed, sealed, and delivered. But we are working to expand our economy. In the manufacturing area, we are going back. We are going back to what was abandoned at E-Tech in Wallerfield. We are going back to Phoenix Park, where we are aiming to build a new free zone. And we have some good prospects there, so in the next few months or so, you'll hear about that. So there are a number of things we are doing. And more importantly, there are two areas of the country that were left as orphan zones. One is the eastern side of Trinidad, from Valencia to Matlot. We are going to change that by the building of access to those areas where you can get to them easily and bring them into the national economy and bring the national economy to them. The other is the South Coast in Moruga. You would have heard mention tonight of our upgrade that is going on right now, an upgrade of the road to Moruga. And when that road is finished, we will have initiatives for agriculture in that part of the country, because that is where a lot of agricultural land is available for production in the agricultural zone. So we are bringing Tobago into the national economy. We're bringing in the eastern part of Trinidad, and we're bringing in the south coast of Trinidad, and we are going to expand our economy in a number of ways. That is how we grow the economy going forward, doing what we are accustomed doing in oil and gas, strengthening it, getting better terms, playing a bigger role in it, and doing other things. And most importantly, having a governance model of which we can all be proud. We have to understand that is how we behave to ourselves that will contribute tremendously to our realization of the tremendous potential that this country has. We have social issues, particularly in our urban areas. And as we have stabilized the economy, and we're now talking about urban renewal as part of the economic activity. Eastern Port of Spain, we are on the ground in Eastern Port of Spain talking to people whose neighborhood we intend to reconstruct and to bring into the modern era, to put them to live in decent housing, to create construction employment in housing, and to improve the quality of life in the city of Port of Spain, which is the capital of Trinidad and Tobago. Right here in Diego Martin, after 5 years of absolute abandonment, I can tell you that your Diego Martin Sports Complex, one of the best in Trinidad and Tobago, is almost to completion. And the next time I come into Diego Martin, it wouldn't be for a political meeting, it would be for the opening of the Diego Martin Sports Complex, which would be a national sporting ground. A project that was left for 5 years untouched. And for those of you from Bagatelle, I can tell you, your community center is under construction. And the one in Four Roads is under construction. And the police station in Carenage is about to start. And only today, Cabinet took a decision for the construction opposite West Mall of the Diego Martin Corporation, head office. And we're doing it in partnership with FCB, where FCB is working with the government, and we are building an FCB bank there and the corporation in one structure, and we are creating a community park in that area. That project has started, and Cabinet has approved the construction. So finally, the Diego Martin Corporation will get out of the house that you're in Crystal Stream there, into the corporation for which the sod was turned about 7 years ago or more. We are doing these things at a time when revenues are very scarce. But we are maintaining a development program. We are maintaining some momentum in developing the country's infrastructure. We are still funding the University of the West Indies. Every secondary school is still open with teachers there. Every primary school is still open. Every hospital is open. Today I had a look at the progress of the Point 14 hospital, and I'm very pleased with what I've seen. So we have not given up ground. We have held ground, and we are moving towards prosperity going forward, even though we are going through a very difficult period. The largesse is over. The grand theft is over. The showing off is over. The gimme should be over. We should put our shoulders to the wheel and listen to the promise of this country, the promise of 1962. Ladies and gentlemen, whatever you expect of your country, whatever you expect the country to be, don't be the one in the forefront to always see the bad in Trinidad and Tobago. There's a lot of good things happening in this country, and there's a lot of good about this country. And while we have to stay away from the destructive behavior, much of it starting in the home, a considerable portion growing in the school, a large portion at the workplace, who do we blame but ourselves? We must take greater personal responsibility for where we are and what we are responsible for. And if we do that and take a pride in our country, a pride in our neighborhood, a pride in our community, a pride in our families, a pride in ourselves, a lot of the damaging and destructive behavior and the negatives that dominate the airwaves and dominate the pages will recede and be replaced by that which is good in Trinidad and Tobago. We of the PNM, we're far from being perfect, but we've done a good job in keeping Trinidad and Tobago as one of the best places in the world. One of the best places in the world. Recently, we had to intervene to protect the carnival in Trinidad and Tobago. And guess what? Rather than stand with the government in protection of the people, there were those who used the opportunity to stir racial and religious hatred. We have those here too. Fortunately, they speak only for themselves, because the vast majority of people in Trinidad and Tobago understand what the government is dealing with, understand what the government is saying, and understand that we have a bright future as long as we grasp it with both hands. So tonight, I want to thank you, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, first and foremost, for electing a responsible government into office. And having done so in supporting the government's reasonable initiatives and sowing the seeds and waiting for the fruit as we grow a future for all our children. Thank you very much for supporting Trinidad and Tobago. And as you do that, you know you would have done that with a rallying cry. Great is the PNM. Great is the PNM. Great is the PNM, and we shall prevail.